Hello and welcome to another Mystic Brew Tartaria edition. I am Radagast, also known as ModWiz 125. The number I'm known as ModWiz 125 is just a requirement by Google because apparently there was another ModWiz somewhere at one point. Anyway, so I noticed I got a lot of subscribers. Now I'm losing them, I guess, because instead of putting up Tartaria videos, I put up music videos, and I'm quite sure there are people who didn't subscribe for music. They subscribed for some new Tartarian stuff. So I'm gonna do some more in that, and I intend to follow up. It's just that doing this study wakes up a lot of genetic memory and past memory, tapping into the collective unconscious. And I don't know how one is supposed to take that information and like present it in a way that other people should take seriously. Part of what I'm doing is I'm writing some of it down as fiction, and then I'll present it as fiction. It's just like, this is just a little fictional, historical fiction here. And then I can kind of not worry about, I can't believe he's asking us to leave. No, it's fiction. So I'll get around things that way. As well as reporting, what my research is indicating. And that's kind of what this video is about. This video is kind of was inspired by me listening to somebody, his name is Mind Unveiled, is the name of his channel. And he has a few videos up right now. He's just kind of getting started. And he's got, I think he's the one who's kind of coming from a Tasarian Irish start of civilization thing. And similarly, like Flamenco, who I think Tasarian does very good work. Flamenco, I think, also has done excellent work. But he also, he'll tell you that the Russians, it's kind of started with Russia. So I understand certain confirmation biases, but just like Michael Tasarian brings, I feel, a treasure trove of good data with him. This person, this Mind Unveiled, is doing great work. Just like all the people, whether it's Martin on Flat Earth British, and Philip Druzhinin, and Conspiracy R Us, and Static in the Attic with his, he's been focusing a little bit more on climate, and Barnabas Nagy. All these people who are doing incredible research, and I'm presenting their ideas for us all to consider. But the research has been enormous. I mean, really. Almost really impossible to keep up with, because again, Martin comes up with all these great books, and he scrolls through them and gives his commentary, but he leaves he leaves the data. He does these huge data dumps, and then it's for us to research, and I think it's a very reasonable thing for him to do. He kind of uncovers it, and why don't the rest of us join in on mining that ore for its gold or whatever it is we're going to pull out of it. And I'm one of the older contributors. I'm 66. I'm one of the older contributors in this Tartaria thing. I think Max Egan is about my age. I'm not sure if he's a little bit older. Sometimes some of these people, like there are a few people who speak who I find out are a few years younger than me, but they haven't been as blessed to keep their hair like I have, and they didn't invent the face cream to keep the wrinkles away. But anyway, and then there's other contributing factors. Anyway, so we all come from our different experiences, and what we might have what we might have embarked upon as a young adult. At the age of 17, I investigated ceremonial magic. Was out of it probably within a year. I have never ever seen ceremonial magic as least the way as the Hermetics practice it as anything wholesome. Wholesome activity doesn't require one to put a protective circle around them. If you have to draw a protective circle around you when you're doing your work, that's because you've gone into the bad neighborhoods. And I consider Hermetic magic constant dabbling in bad neighborhoods. So I'm not going to really get. I don't want to make this much about me. Just kind of like some of the things I say, just to kind of lay a little bit of a background. But I've been investigating the metaphysical, paranormal, and the mysteries for much of. You know, I started at 17. I'm 66. That's, you know, what is that, 49 years? So, you know, I have a little time spent in it. And not all of that time was necessarily spent wisely, because I had an alcoholic. Within those years were some alcoholic years, and they were full of the assholery that goes with that disease. So the topic I want to get, because one of the things that I don't know what the man's name is on Mind Unveiled, but he was suggesting that we might have to change our cosmology to understand, to be able to unlock the mystery of what we're calling the Tartarians. I like to call them the old culture, because as far as I'm concerned, Tartary was kind of like the last stand, of more or less. And it's even the name, I think, was interesting. I mean, that's for further things. But what I want, the main point I want to make is, I think there's been a lot, as we know, we've been lied to just about everything. Almost everything is an inversion. The good guy, who the truly benevolent people are cast as, you know, evil, and, you know, and one of the biggest boogie words, one of the biggest curses that can be placed upon wisdom is to call it pagan. So I think we should. I just want to kind of set. I think I'm going to first start just by. I'm going to go into my browser where I've looked up the word pagan, because again, the etymology of these things will help us. So let me transition and go into my browser proper. So what we have here, this is paganus, or paganus, and basically, you know, what it comes from is an area outside of a city, countryside. Okay, so basically we're talking about rural as opposed to city. Cities are unnatural. We must remember that. You know, like, you know, we come from nature, and I mean, cities don't have to be unnatural, but very often they're starting to go there. So down here, so they have it as I guess paganus. But anyway, number one, of or pertaining to the countryside, rural or rustic. All right, so that's the primary meaning of pagan. Two, by extension, rustic, unlearned. That's a city person's, you know, take on, you know, the hillbillies. You know, all their wisdom is about how to live in nature and not how to live in the city, so they're considered unlearned. So by extension is unlearned. Okay, but again, that's by extension. The original thing, this means countryside, rural, or rustic. Third, a villager or countryman. So again, of living in a village as opposed to a city. Fourth, civilian. Now we're still, you know, we're getting creepy. And the last one is heathen, pagan. Okay. Now, isn't it very interesting that this originally Latin word now has its least, you know, the word heathen and pagan and all what that means. And in many cases, the word heathen is an Anglo-Saxonized or an Anglo-Saxon type word that, again, means the people that live in the heath. In other words, we're getting back to villagers, to countryside, to rustic. So this is the root of the pagans. And the word pagan was used by the Romans against the rural people. Let me just get a little bit more before I go into my diatribe here. Okay. This is, what is this? This is Latin dictionary. Civilians. Now they have it reversed, because again, now we have a state, and the state is starting to corrupt everything. So, but they had their first definition here is civilian. Third definition is countryman, as opposed to the first one. So, but you know, again, this is Latin dictionary. The other one was from Wiktionary, and I really think this is the more learned one, because again. Anyway, and then we got Pagani here. This is where it really kind of, I think, gets a little bit silly, where a surname, a town in Italy, and of course the last one, plural meaning pagan. So they're, you know, they're even trying to cover up the etymology, to me, by putting all these things before this last thing, is trying to cover up that pagani was an actual Roman word hurled at the countryside by the people who lived in cities and practiced the state religions of polytheism. So maybe I'll put myself back on the screen here. So the Greeks and the Romans were state religion polytheists. They were not pagans. The other thing that we have to remember is that the Romans and Greeks gave us nothing other than what they managed to not completely fuck up from the people that they inherited it from. The Romans from the Etruscans and the Greeks from the Pelasgians. They learned everything from them. They came in with you know, their weapons and their unlearnedness, befriended the locals, and then when they had enough of their metallurgy and thought that they had command of it, they turned on them. These are devious, lying people, these Greeks and Romans, okay? And I'm not talking about modern Greeks or modern Romans. I'm talking about the fictional characters in history. And, you know, again, there's real people, and then there's these systems, these fictions. So when we're often, you know, when the word pagan is thrown out there, we think of these people who had these state religions, and, you know, and their sacrifices. We forget about what went on daily at the temple in Jerusalem. And that, you know, and again, a lot of these sacrifices were at feasts that a largely vegetarian people would have a meat meal, and instead of just outright slaughtering the animal, they made a sacred event of it. And then of course there was, you know, again these state religions could just get to the part of theater. To me, the Temple at Jerusalem was a bloody theater. You know, I mean, you have to really kind of know what the daily routine was there, and you know, it's just not within what I consider sacred. So I really feel that if we're going to understand this old culture, who we're calling the Tartarians, we have to understand the pagan culture where the mysteries arose from. All of civilization, all of this wonderful architecture we're glorifying over, is through understanding alchemy. All of this came from the pagans, but not the Romans and the Greeks. In other words, not the state religions, not even the Phoenicians who had state religion. The moment we get into the state religions, we know we have left wholesomeness. The state religions are control mechanisms, and often with quite a bit of commerce thrown in. So if we're going to move forward and really understand the Tartarians, we're going to have to take the boogeyman out of the word pagan and understand that the culture that brought all this glory was a pagan culture, one that was steeped in the mysteries of nature, Mother Nature, Gaia, to the inherited. I mean, if you look at the Greek mythology, you start out real simple: Gaia, Mother Earth, and Uranus. We could call, for to be very inclusive, you could call it the membrane of the Earth realm. You know, what represented the sky, the protector from what's here and what's beyond the atmosphere. And that was the simple layout. There was Mother Earth and Uranus, and then they come in with what happens in the conspiracy, and the immediate demeaning of the divine feminine starts when they have her conspiring with Kronos. Again, all this other stuff is the Greek. I'm going to call, you know, I'll call what historians are calling the Greeks. All right. Again, I was married to a Greek, and I had my favorite father-in-law was Greek. This is not, these we're stuck with these words, and we're stuck with them by his historians. And so we know, and even when we were discussing timelines, I mean, we're at a serious disadvantage. So we're going to stumble. We're going to make errors as we make our way through this morass. But as long as we permit ourselves error, as you know, within the spirit that we will correct when we find our errors, we should be fine and be able to just kind of have a dialogue. Get these ideas out on the table, so we can all take a good look at them, and then we can have discussions about what we think is working. Water. And so basically, I kind of, to prepare people who come and watch my videos on, as I talk about the old culture of Tartaria, I kind of want to not suddenly like be, you know, throwing in, like say something that's like, oh, I didn't know you were a devil worshiper, Radagast. You know, I don't even believe in a devil. You know, nor do I believe in worship. I believe in revering and reverence, and I respect, but worship, that kind of groveling stuff, I've never gotten any signals from that loves me to grovel. We were created in dignity and not in sin. And that's why the cosmologies are crucial to not being clueless in creation. If one has a cosmology of their own origin and where they belong in the big scheme of things, and it's an error, that makes one clueless in creation. Clueless. The right cosmology is absolutely essential to locating oneself. Because as within, as without. The Hermeticists made that as above, so below, because they left the earth and suddenly gave agency to the heavens. For the pagans, the agency was always with Mother Nature. Always. And I have like two other I have three photos. Oh, that's the wrong photo. Because the other thing to remember about the mystery cultures is they were what we would call matriarchal. Women didn't rule, they managed things, and managed things very compassionately, very well, and they weren't soft ladies either. Let me get to here. This is the scene I want to show. Now here is maybe I can kind of maybe I have to retransition that to make that fit properly. Apparently that's the fit they're going to give me. I'll blow it up in my window. So this is Georgia money, and it's interesting. Philip Druzhinin was quite frustrated not being able to find official United States money. For me, the official United States is when the creepiness began. So this is called the Phoenix Bank of Georgia. What's interesting, there's some kind of, looks to me like a Greek warrior, and of course the other thing, the man is bearded. It was the Romans who started the short-haired and clean-faced look, because I think they had a cootie. There's a certain the people who hated nature were obsessed with not hygiene, almost sterilization. There's hygiene and then there's sterile. And those who are natural practice hygiene. Those who are nature-phobic get into sterility as a concept. So anyway, let me make sure that that's not me on camera. Good. Phoenicia Bank. So what I want to kind of break down again. So we kind of see this person, but again, we don't see any weaponry. That's the other thing. The matriarchy were not into weapons. I mean, do you think that they're going to go through? Women are going to go through 9 months of bringing a body into the world to dispose of it in something as stupid as war? I mean, it's one thing to defend yourself, but war. We're talking about war now. You know, one side decides, oh, we like what the other has. And of course, that envy and jealousy is another sign of a certain virus that entered the human animal or the human species. So what we see here, now this is a very interesting thing, is that we have what was certainly a woman who's sitting in kind of a sovereign position. And we have the anchor, which is one sign of the commerce and also like anchoring into the land. But what's interesting is this, to me, is the exchange of symbols here. You now, once again, when we recall that the old culture, or the Tartarians, if for those who don't understand my use of the word old culture yet, were pagans, okay? But they were nature, and so Mercury might go, it wasn't a state religion thing. Well, I think what's interesting, first of all, there in the mysteries is there are much deeper concepts of aeons. You know, we might fall into the word of like kind of qualities of the originator or prime god, so to speak. But I'm not here for cosmology. This is to keep it a little bit simple and to kind of keep the to keep my new subscribers, you know, with some content here. Anyway, so we have a you know, a sovereign, a woman sovereign, not overdone, because this is a responsibility. This isn't a privileged spot. This is to be in this position is one of great responsibility. Anyway, now if this is Mercury, and it certainly looks like his hat and whatever, he usually has the caduceus. And generally, you'll have one of the kind of, you know, especially within the polytheisms, usually you'll have some kind of female deity bearing the horn of plenty. Now, he was more, so we should kind of get into the energy just a little bit of what Mercury represented. Mercury represented above all commerce and trade, and was also considered the messenger of the gods. So if you wanted to get a piece of information from one place to another, Mercury was your person, was your dude. And but generally, the horn of plenty, which is a representative of the abundance of nature, and you know, just, you know, it's just there in plenty. It's more than you can even handle it, and it keeps on coming. What I find interesting is that she's holding his implement, representing trade, and he's holding an implement of the plenty. And so I kind of see it almost. It's almost like, again, you know, where he's basically is commissioned to do what he's commissioned to do, and that we the human species we are in charge of trade, and if he wants to flit about, he can just go about and spread the abundance. That's how I'm reading this. And then we see all kinds of, you know, little nature spirits in here playing flutes. These are all kind, and this looks almost like the fairy queen, like Oberon, the fairy king or whatever, Oberon, and Titania. So the mytholo, you know, the world that is called mythos, which is really just greater reality. Mythos is an attempt to blend the realm of creation where things arrive from and then come into you know, material creation. There's a kind of like a marriage between them, and mythos is a way of tying the two worlds together. We know that there's blurred lines, so we realize, you know, if something seems a little fantastical, it's because in the other side of reality, what seems fantastical in our, let's say, our physics is not. It's quite reasonable in the shamanic world, so to speak. Okay, so this is my little commentary on the old culture. We're still seeing it here before the official takeover. This is when you know, again, we see, you know, all this old architecture in all over America. So there's obviously some residue before they were completely thrown out. Here's another one where what we, and the interesting thing is, let's look. Here's, like, you know, kind of like a matriarch. Okay. Now here's Mercury again. In this case, he does have his caduceus, and he seems to be with what looks like a sovereign. But in her hand, what do you see? You see a wrench. And look at the muscles on her. Okay? And then all these women, look at the muscles on them. And of course, in one hand, she has an easel, and there's a brush, and there's a palette. On the other hand, she has like some kind of, you know, thing that you might smooth over plaster with. I mean, these are women at work. Okay, these are the kind. This is like a little bit of a little snapshot of the matriarchy. And again, and I'm glad to see that, you know, because the males were not excluded. But these are the managers of the ancient world. And then I'm just going to close with, you know, we have all these different names. You know, we have like Jersey, New Jersey, you know, New Zealand and whatever. So we know that sometimes there was an original place, and then there's a new there's a new place with the old name because the people traveled and they want to keep the name of where they arose. So this is, you know, look, we have all these different maps that you know, especially Martin presents, and this is, I don't know if this is a cutout because a lot of times I do screenshots and they don't blow up well, so I can't remember where I got this, but it's one of the multiple maps, and this is within Moscovia, and because here's Moscow, all right, it even says, let me just blow this up for you. Okay, Moscow or Moskawa, all right, and it says residence of the Tsar, okay? So, and then we can see there's a really big kind of complex and then a smaller complex. You see the little flag there, little flag there. This one doesn't have a flag on it. Some of them don't have flags, but these two have flags. And, but what I find particularly interesting, okay, here's Moscow, right here. What do we see here? Now, remember, there's not always J's. So that's Jerusalem. Okay, so here's Moscow, here's Jerusalem, or when the J gets invented, that'll become Jerusalem. Just like before you had Jude, you had Yud. All right, so this is Jerusalem outside of Moscow. So I guess my question is, which is the original Jerusalem, which is the new Jerusalem? Further, what I also found kind of interesting with tying in with what's Jerusalem doing outside Moscow, Fomenko actually contends that the Old Testament account of the building of certain walls, maybe the walls of Jerusalem, are in fact the building of the walls of the Kremlin. Wouldn't that be interesting? Especially when you have a Jerusalem here and Moscow here. But anyway, again, this is just curious. So we have this, apparently this area here is called Sloboda, but it's, well, that's a Chonea, Sloboda. Okay, then we have Jerusalem, Greater Moscow, and then we have here, right below Jerusalem and right below the big Moscow, and I guess this is where Jerusalem is, because again, we have the cities are indicated by these little things, and that's why Moscow is huge. And then we have these other, you know, these other kind of things, and so right underneath Jerusalem, this must be Jerusalem here. This indicated by this little town signature. And then right over here it says Sloboda, where strangers dwell. Wow. Strangers. Again, this very curious, I think, that Jerusalem and where strangers dwell. And then for the last, isn't that interesting? Over here, right outside, matter of fact, this other little town outside of Moscow is called Ismailovo. Take off the ovo and you have Ismail, or Ishmael, you know, there was Ishmael and Isaac, right? So here's Ishmael. And of course, we're going to be heading over into later on, you know, when you start heading east, you start heading into, you know, what would later become very Muslim Asia. The stans, you know, Kazakhstan, all those stans they're all Muslim. And here's Ismailovo. So anyway, that's kind of going to be the end of this installation. So I hope that some of the people who thought I was never going to talk about Tartary again are reassured. There's just, you know, I just feel that there's certain aspects of this, of telling our story, of recovering who we are from all of the nonsense and out and out lies and deception and inversions. Could be some of the revelation of who we are could be shocking for some people. And I just thought it was really important to kind of put the word pagan into perspective, so that when we hear it, we're not thinking about we're not thinking about Moloch when we think pagans. All right, that's a state religion. Completely, state religions have nothing to do with pagans. Those are polytheists, and sometimes those polytheists tend to have a state, you know, a state deity, which is where other people got their ideas from. And I'll leave that there. Okay. So, you can look forward to more music and more Tartaria. And ultimately, if I get really going with the music, I might start a separate YouTube channel for that, just to keep things clean. All right, be well, take care of yourselves.